I actually don't really like the term functional fitness. What's functional for a linebacker in the NFL versus a triathlete? It's completely different. So I think the term functional is a buzzword in the industry, and we're an industry that sells trends and sells short-term fixes. And I think what we need to start shifting to, and I think there is a real shift now, is to what's best practice and what's going to give people longevity and what's going to get them the best results.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Cameron Falloon, founder and co-CEO of BodyFit Training. In this episode, we discuss BFT's approach to progressive, strength-based workouts. Cam shares his take on functional fitness and career development for coaches. Plus, we cover the acquisition of BFT by Xponential Fitness and Cam's continued focus on international growth. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. To learn more, head to fitt.co/Jack Taylor. That's FITT.co/Jack Taylor. Hi, Cam. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, g'day, Joe. Pleasure to be here, mate. I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, excited to chat. Lots to get into across boutique fitness, expansion internationally, functional training, strength training. Yeah, so a lot of things to kind of check off the list here. But to kick things off for folks who aren't familiar, or maybe just for a little bit more insight, could you introduce yourself and tell us about BodyFit Training?
Yeah, pleasure. My name's Cam Falloon, founder of BFT. My background is predominantly strength and conditioning, working with elite sporting teams. So soccer, Australian rules football, which is our native game over here, similar to what the NFL, I guess, is to America. And have been fortunate over nearly 30 years in the industry, mate, to work in a lot of different areas of the industry, from starting out as a PT in the UK back in 1995, working with the everyday weekend warrior, to rich and famous, working with orthopedics and spending a lot of time in spinal rehabilitation. And then that led me to high performance environments and working with athletes and team sports. And I guess BFT is a culmination of that, really. It's a culmination of almost 30 years of experience and taking the lessons and learnings over that journey, but in particular from a high performance environment, and saying, okay, how can I utilize those skills and where are the gaps and opportunities within the fitness industry? And that led to doing some extensive research. And I guess the easiest way to, probably for listeners to understand, there's two really well-known global brands. And if you think of CrossFit, one end of that spectrum, who've done a lot of great work exposing people to strength training and getting people under barbells and kettlebells, etc. And then at the other end of that spectrum, I see Orange Series, an example, who do more cardiovascular aerobic training. Great program, by the way, and great, it's super business. And I think we sit right in the middle of that, right smack bang in the middle. We do considered strength and conditioning, but for the weekend warrior, we do 8-week training cycles. It's periodized, it's progressed. And we utilize the same thinking, knowledge, science, and process as what you would do working with a team, where you have a team goal and a team program, and you plan out a macro cycle. But within that, there's 40 or 50 athletes that all have their individual journeys that they're going on, and that's in essence the philosophy of BFT. It's bringing, in my view, and this is just my view at the point in time when I was looking at putting this together, is a more structured, high performance approach to training. Very few businesses that are running the industry, when I was doing my research, are founded by and run by people who have actually spent their life working with athletes, where every week is your livelihood is dependent on a win or a loss. And it's a great environment to be in. It's a great environment to learn from. And BFT is trying to bring those learnings into the general space and make those methodologies and those practices accessible to the everyday weekend warrior.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you walk through that as someone that comes from both an athletic background, but then also personal training, group fitness, at different times owned and operated a CrossFit affiliate, and so have exposure to a lot of different things. And now as you look across the industry, it still hasn't quite been cracked. Obviously, you all are working on it, and there are different concepts that are saying, like, how do we apply this high performance, you say, athletic training to this group environment where it is structured, it is progressive, you are kind of ratcheting the weights up over time. You understand what that looks like, but you can do it safely and effectively for individuals in the group setting. I think is like this, how do you manage that safety aspect? How do you manage the progress? How do you manage achieving those goals? And from your perspective, in terms of that programming and getting it right, whether it was in Studio One to then franchising, building the playbook, how did you think about it beyond like, oh, I see this opening, but now operationalizing it turnkey kind of franchise level? What was that kind of jump like?
Yeah, it was tough. One thing I really struggled with was, funnily enough, the programming side of it, because you go from being so specific with athletes whom you know and have so much information and data on to now going, wow, I've got a program for people I don't even know. And so probably more than anything, mentally, that was a real battle, because in sport, you're trying to get perfection. You know that you're never going to get it, but you're trying to just tweak and fine tune and dial up athletes, dial them down at the right moments, week in, week out. And it's a fun thing to do when you have all this knowledge as well as the psychological experiences with the athletes. There's certainly a human element to it. It's not all science. And now all of a sudden, I don't know who's coming into the studios, right? So I think mentally that was more of a difficulty than anything. And once I overcame that, it was trial and error. I was really fortunate that working in Australian rules football, I'm not sure if you know the sport, but it's very much a hybrid sport. In the NFL, you have players and athletes who they play one position and they are absolute thoroughbreds in that position and they train for it, much like a 100-meter sprinter. Our guys are more like decathletes. So the beauty of that is, you're getting this really well-rounded approach to your conditioning, right? You need to be brilliant aerobically. You got to be able to run all day. You need to be strong and powerful. You need to have great agility. It's a 360-degree sport, so you need to be strong in all planes of movement. And so therefore, you have to train those people in all those planes of movement. And then you want to work on injury prevention strategies. So in essence, I thought, hang on, it's staring me in the face, right? Like that's just a great way to train. And people look at AFL athletes and they're somewhat aspirational in terms of how they look. They're lean, they're not too big and bulky. They're not sort of that bodybuilder stereotype, but they have that sort of aspirational physique. So I was like, maybe that's the path. So that's where I started. I went, let's go back to what I know best and start playing around with that. And I was very fortunate. I had two ex-athletes who I'd spent a lot of time with in AFL. They were retiring and they were looking for opportunities. And I sort of ran this crazy idea past them and they were keen to jump on board and get involved with the first two studios and say, right, well, we'll give it a go and we'll back you in. And we made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of lessons. And that flowed on from doing another two studios, and was pretty confident that when we hit number 3 and 4 that we had the bulk of it right. And then really from there, it was getting, the back end, the operational stuff right. So working on the franchising contracts, operations manuals. And I was very fortunate that late in 2017, I met a couple of potential investors completely from left field. Ironically, we'd all come from a very similar industry or same industry in the AFL over a period of time. And they brought different skill sets to me, which was fantastic. So in late 2017, we joined forces and, they could see that there was something really special about this and different to what was in the marketplace. Largely, to be honest, took a leap of faith in me, which I'm forever grateful for. And then in particular, one of the partners, Richard Burnett, he and I knuckled down late 2017 and got him involved then in the franchise process in terms of the documentation. He needed to put his stamp on things as well, being a shareholder now. And we knuckled down for 7 months and went, right, let's not sell. My goal was, I had a lot of people lined up wanting to buy franchises, and I got some good advice that, don't be in a rush to do this. Get it right first. Get the back end right. Walk in the shoes of the people who are going to invest in you. Make the mistakes that maybe they'll make and show them that you've spent your own money. And that's what those first sites was about, was me taking the risks, me making the mistakes, falling, getting up again, and being able to genuinely look investors in the eye and say, well, I've actually been where you are, but I've got the solutions and I've got the answers because I did this over 2 years and we've made those wrongs right, so to speak. So Rich and I got to work and we launched franchises in April of 2018, and it's been a pretty interesting journey from there.
Yeah, I want to come back to that, launching the franchises and starting to scale and what that looks like. But you mentioned And I hadn't quite put it together this way exactly, but it makes sense to hear you talk about it, talking about the AFL and even rugby and the functional sports that kind of exist in Australia. Like the functional fitness studio concepts are such an export of Australia in so many ways, and those concepts keep going now into strength, Pilates, all of these different areas where you're like, oh, was it because of the functional aspect and the hybrid aspect of some of your primary sports, or was it just kind of happenstance, the interest in health and wellness and fitness, the people like yourself, the kind of innovators of that space? Do you trace that to anything? Can you pinpoint it to like how is functional fitness like this Australian export where the studios are coming out of there and now becoming kind of like global phenomenons?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually don't really like the term functional fitness. Like I talked about, I was fortunate to spend some time at the Green Bay Packers. A good friend, Mark Levat, was a conditioning coach there, and he spent some time in Australia with an AFL football club that I was in observing us, and he reciprocated that opportunity for me. And to be honest, I think they do strength training better than us. It's just so ingrained in the culture in America through high school and college systems, and you don't get that in Australia. So, but in discussions with him, what we realized was, maybe the integration of the science and technology like GPS technology and other platforms, we do slightly better. And I think that's come out of our sports, just the nature of our sports. AFL's extremely brutal on the body. And so I'm not sure it's necessarily come out of sports. What's functional for a linebacker in the NFL versus a triathlete? It's completely different. So I think the term functional is it's a buzzword in the industry, and we're an industry that sells trends and sells short-term fixes. And I think what we need to start shifting to, and I think there is a real shift now, is to what's best practice and what's going to give people longevity and what's going to get them the best results for what they want, because everyone wants something different. But the reality is, if you look at it on a global scale, I'd say as a global industry, we're failing. People on average come just over 1 day a week, and we're taking their money for it. Like that's just a fundamental flaw in our industry. And I keep going back to that high performance environment where our obligation is to give the athletes the very best opportunity for them to develop and evolve and be successful. And some make it and some don't, but our obligation is to give our best. And I think if we can bring that mindset into the retail consumer fitness space, that's going to be a big step change in our industry, in my view.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's something that we talk about and think about quite a bit, because even when you go from a traditional, brick and mortar like breakage model, right? You pay for a membership you don't use, and then you get into the kind of boutique model. It's like now more based on utilization, but are you getting the kind of results that you want, and how do you make sure that they continue to get them over time and keep coming, as you mentioned? And then it's even within that, you want them to tone, you want them to tighten, you want them to strength and flexibility, mobility, like functional, all of these buzzwords to your point, where at the end of the day, it's longevity, it's health span, it's, kind of quality of life that you're selling as a habit and as a kind of a way of living, right? How do you do it now, or have you figured out how to incorporate that messaging, how to make sure you're instilling that? Like it's it's one thing to make that accessible or build the brand and philosophy around that, and it's another thing to outwardly like lead with that as what BFT is and what it delivers? Or do you do it more subliminally with like just infusing it into the programming and the studios and the brand?
Yeah, that's a good question, and to be honest, it's probably multifaceted. The short answer is it's a long journey. It's a slow burn. Our tagline is different, better, and to be really honest, the reason it is that is because we couldn't articulate exactly what you're trying to say. It's really hard to, in a tagline for a business, try and get across what we're trying to do here with BFT, and so we just said, well, we're doing it different, and we think it's better. And it's a little bit cheeky, and it can certainly potentially put people off, but I guess what it does is keeps us accountable. We're okay with that, and I'm really transparent. All group training is flawed. Let's be quite honest about it, right? So, but we're trying damn hard to be as perfect as we can be. The key thing is, I think, one, there's a couple of things. I think speaking I feel comfortable speaking with some authority because I have spent my life working with athletes, and I have worked in rehabilitation settings with, orthopedics and those types of professionals where it has to be best practice. There's no guesswork. It's not on a whim or I think this. It's got to be research validated, and yeah, there's some gut feel and experience, but on the whole, it's best practice and it's collaborative. And so that's one. I think I'm comfortable talking to it, and when people ask questions, I can easily answer them if they're challenging. We should be training harder, and our heart rate should be harder. Well, okay, that's cool, but strength day today, so and explain why. So we that then flows into how we disseminate our information. So we run technology and screens. All of our programming's on screens. Our sets and our reps and our timing and our tempos and whatever else we're doing. And what that does is allows the coaches to focus on coaching and educating. And so, we see the screens as like the traffic lights. They're just directing the traffic and telling you when to stop and start. But we educate and invest in the coaches to coach. That's their job. And an example of that I see in the industry broadly is I rarely see trainers and PTs telling people to slow down versus yelling at them and rah and say work harder. But we know that rest is just such a valuable part and almost the most important factor in timing, right? In exercise prescription. It changes the outcome of basically everything when you're training. So we spend a lot of time educating trainers on that. And the more we can do to empower trainers to be better, then eventually that's going to flow on to them just adding little bits of information and sprinkling that gold dust on the members. And over time, organically, hopefully that will happen. And we're starting to see that happen. It's been a while, but we send out our programs in 8-week training cycles. They come with comprehensive notes. We want to give as much information as we can to upskill and educate the trainers and give them the best opportunity to give the members the best experience. And I guess I want to be clear is that what we do probably better than anything is build communities and make it fun. But if you can have a trainer that's really well informed, feels motivated and engaged, then they're going to give you the best, right? I talked about being in that high performance environment is you got to turn up every day and give your best. And I know being a PT and doing that years ago, it's tough. You get out of bed at 4 a.m. and it can be tough. So how can we provide them the tools to be motivated to get out of bed and get excited and deliver? I think that's the opportunity. And yeah, when I was doing my research in 2015, one of the staggering things I found was the average lifespan of a trainer in Australia was 9.5 months, which again is another damning statistic on the industry. So you're getting a bunch of people who want to follow their passion, are investing money into getting educated, but there's no longevity. Like it's a pretty shitty proposition, right? So how do we keep those people in the industry? How do we keep them motivated? What are the opportunities to invest in them? Because ultimately, in a franchise system, it's pretty simple. There's three really critical people: the franchisee, the members, and the franchisor. And if we don't give the franchisee the tools and the processes and the systems and the ongoing support and education to be successful, then the members don't have a great experience. They're not having the best experience. They're not hanging around. If they're not hanging around, we all suffer. So in essence, it's a really simple philosophy. And again, goes back to that high performance environment that you've got to understand who you're working for and what the objectives are. And, in a team sport culture working with athletes, it's the two most important people in my view are the athlete or athletes and the coach. That's who I work for. That's who I'm trying to drive results for. And in this situation, those two people are the franchisees and the members.
It's a really interesting point to hear you talking about it. And not all of this is a surprise, right? When you think about why a concept like this would work and the philosophy, this high performance, the programming, how you're designing and implementing the workouts, leveraging technology, right, to deliver those, to make sure that coaches can spend time coaching and actually applying that philosophy and programming. And then when you get right down to the coaches, this is something you mentioned at the onset. Like when you are working with athletes, you're trying to get perfection and you're trying to really dial it in, and you know them so kind of intimately, right? You have that relationship to know what they need from a programming performance standpoint, but also how to push them, how to kind of turn the dials, how to egg them on at the right time, how to pull back at the right time. How challenging was it for you, given that you're kind of pursuing this kind of high performance and implementing a lot of what you've learned in athletics, to say like, hey, I'm not going to know a lot of these coaches. I'm not like individually going to have my say in choosing them and training them. We are going to obviously build this support system from afar. But A, how big of a challenge was that for you? And how have you been able to kind of bridge that gap to say, like, I have full faith in these coaches and we know that what we're doing from this kind of support system standpoint, like, delivers the best product on the ground every day, because it is those coaches and it is the franchisees and it ultimately who are one-on-one interfacing with the members.
That's going to be the greatest and probably most constant ongoing challenge of, I think, of our franchise system and potentially any franchise system that has, you're forward facing and delivering service to customers, is consistency. But that's also, the opportunity. I think that's the great thing about it, right? I love doing, training, and I don't do a lot of it these days because we've got, fantastic team of people that get out and train the franchisees and their trainers and run our education. I am actually getting back on the floor on Thursday next week, which I'm really excited about, at a boot camp, which is our franchisee onboarding. And the beautiful thing about it is that I get to learn as well. Just because I founded the business and I have a background in strength and conditioning doesn't mean I know everything. And I think people who have been in those high performance environments like intimately understand that, and they're acutely aware of the fact that there's always opportunities to learn and grow and see things slightly differently. And BFT is not perfect, it's just BFT. And we're trying to be the best at being BFT. We're not trying to be CrossFit. We're not trying to be anything else. We're just trying to be the best at what we do. And I do stuff. I talk about queuing and some of those things that maybe coaches don't think is important, because we sometimes just want to get over technical on things and show how smart we are as PTs. And we're often telling everyone what they're doing wrong rather than telling them what they're doing right. And I love hearing cues. I love, I treat them as putting tools in your toolkit, and they're probably some of the best things that I get out of every single time we do education. Is I learn and hear just different cues and just see it through a slightly different lens, because it's great. You've got 20 or 30 people in a room and they've all got different experiences and they've all been coached potentially at some point in their time. And so, yeah, it's a challenge, but it's such a great opportunity. And, this business was partly built off trying to make a really positive impact on the global fitness industry. And you can't do that unless you're investing in people and trying to upskill them. And if we can really work hard to work together with our franchisees and our trainers and just work together to, keep each other accountable and raise the standard a little bit, then we're winning. That's my simple sort of take and view on it.
Hey everyone, we'll get back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no-brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high-growth companies, and really invests in building long-term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fit Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. To learn more, head to fit.co/Jack Taylor. That's FITT.co/Jack Taylor. Now back to the show. That's, I think, a good place, thinking about that, building the global brand, getting back to the sequential evolution. We kind of left off at the kind of 2017, 2018, like really starting to think about how to scale the business. You brought on some partners. You had kind of perfected it on like you said, like the first 3, 4, 5 studios to really have a good sense of what it was going to take. Was it at that point that you kind of said, this is the goal, the mission is to be a global brand? Our aspiration is to have 1,000+ studios? Or was it at that point you're still thinking, hey, how do we get the next franchise, then the next franchise? I mentioned that it's kind of a leading question because it wasn't long between then to 2021, right? At least in the US, the license is acquired by Xponential. So it was pretty quick between, hey, we have 4 kind of figured out, and now we're selling the business for North American expansion. So what was that period like, and how clear was that vision in your mind at that time?
Yeah, it was really clear from the get-go for me that once I'd spent that 2015 year doing a lot of research and speaking to a lot of people, that first and foremost, I found really strong in the position that there was a clear white space in the market that really suited my skill set and experience. Without specifically knowing exactly what that looked like, I knew the opportunity existed. So it was really just then having the courage to take the first leap of faith. Once we got the first one up and running, I had modeled out what this could look like, and I had some mentors, and definitely I knew that franchising was what I wanted to do. Maybe I'll go back a step. The three key things that came out of the research were, as I talked about, the longevity of trainers. So how do we keep people in this industry longer that want to be in the industry, and give them a career and a livelihood that allows them to be in an industry that they're clearly already investing money in. So that was problem number one that I wanted to solve. Problem number two was education. I just, coming from my background, and not saying that everyone has to do, multiple years at uni and master's degrees, etc., but everything had started to go online, and shorter became better. Go and do a one-day Olympic lifting course. Are you kidding me? And so we're in the people business, and I think one of the things I underestimated when I came out of uni was I actually really felt like I needed to develop the people skills and the empathy and the working and the body language and those sorts of things. So let's get back to face-to-face education, and we have an education vertical to the business. And then for me, coming through, and I think this is part of the PT longevity issue, is it's hard. It's really hard to invest into the fitness industry. Only 10 years ago, it was predominantly big boxes, and aside maybe CrossFit licenses, it was big box gyms, and it was tough. It's a big investment, right? So when you're a young, aspiring PT or someone who's a health professional who wants to maybe be in this space, how do you get the capital? So how can we build a model that is low investment, high yield, is changing people's lives and for the better, and hopefully keeping good people in the industry? So that were the three real key pillars behind the motivation for me to do this. And then it became, okay, well, if I genuinely want to bite off a big challenge like this and change the industry, then there's got to be a number that satisfies me to say, okay, you've made a little positive dent in the industry, and that was 1,000 studios. So that was always the goal from the get-go, and many told me I was crazy. But you got to have goals. You got to have goals, and we talk about it all the time. If you try and sell 10, gain 10 members for the month, you probably get 3 or 4. If you try and get 50, you'll probably get 15. So bite off more than you can chew, and keep chewing is my philosophy on that.
Yeah, still going now, obviously. Getting back on the studio, you said the coaching floor, in the coming weeks. So still very much invested in what that looks like, and obviously driving the business forward to make that dent. One thing I wanted to talk about was the acquisition, partnership, whatever the kind of official wording is with Xponential. I think obviously we're in the US, and seeing that headline, it was like, oh, BFT was acquired and now it's an Expo brand. To some extent, that is true. You still retain the rights for global expansion. So can you just talk about maybe getting the details right for us to make sure that we have it right? Who has what, and then also how that came about, why it was the right decision, why you can still continue to operate globally, some of the intricacies there.
Yeah, look, to be honest, big part of it was COVID. We prior to COVID, Rich and I had spent a lot of time in the US. We'd invested in our first flagship store there in Santa Monica. We'd spent a lot of time doing research, trade shows, and it became really apparent, as I talked about. I think, in America, the strength and conditioning is so much better understood because of your high school and college system. So we got immediate feedback that what I saw, which was that sort of that middle ground between CrossFit and Orange Theory, we were getting from the US people direct feedback saying, you guys have nailed it. This is exactly what we need. So right, let's invest in the States. So we did that. We got Santa Monica off and running, and it was going really well. And then COVID hits, and we just signed Fort Lauderdale, which actually opened in COVID. We'd never face-to-face met the franchisee, done face-to-face training. So I guess testament to the systems that we have and the processes that we're still able to get them open on the other side of the world and get them running profitably. But COVID hit, and so we couldn't travel. We're in Melbourne. We're in the most lockdown city in the world. And it became, we're watching our investments slowly and our market opportunities slowly go away. We'd invested millions of dollars, and by chance, I got introduced to Anthony Geisler through a mutual friend, and we were just chatting, and we'd had a few chats, and then unbeknownst to me, he jumped in his car one day because I'd been telling him how bloody good BFT is and blah, blah, blah. And he'd been telling me how good Xponential and all his brands are. And he decided to jump in his car and get up to Santa Monica and sit on the corner of 4th and Wilshire and watch a session because we were training outdoors because of the restrictions. Rang me the next day and said, hey, I happened to go past your gym and watch the session outside. It was unbelievable. There was like 50 people and the community was amazing, and love to get on a call and for you to introduce me to your business partners, and I'm keen to have a discussion. So it was more opportunistic that, to be honest, with Xponential, with their experience, their networks, their knowledge and know-how in America, and our inability at the time to capitalize on our previous investment, that they were probably best placed to take the brand and do it justice in the US. And that would allow us to focus on our existing regions and continue to grow and consolidate them, and maybe dabble in a few more regions where we had some opportunities. And, America's a big chunk to bite off. Like it's a big beast. So it would have been, I'm not saying it would have been a huge, a distraction for us. It's obviously a great opportunity, but having the confidence and seeing what they're doing with the brand over there allows us to really focus on our region. So yeah, it's a win-win. And in terms of the relationship, you articulated it right. It's exactly what you said. We've retained the rights. Essentially, we're the master franchisors to the brand outside of North America. We work really closely with their team. They own the IP, but all of the programming and innovation still comes out of our head office here in Melbourne. So it's a very much a hand-in-glove relationship, and very unusual, for these types of deals, to be really honest. And that's what we like. We like the fact that Anthony's an entrepreneurial guy. He's the CEO of a public company, but at the core of it, he's an entrepreneur, and we got on well. We have similar values, and it's been a great decision for the brand.
Yeah, this might be a no comment, but is there still a relationship where they retain the right to acquire the master franchisees, like to work with you in a greater capacity beyond this kind of North America agreement? Obviously, you all are still working together now, but it's not uncommon in fitness to do some type of partnership down the line where, you're working together, or they continue to invest in scaling you all across, the globe, et cetera.
Yeah, look, to be honest, there's no obligation either way. If we choose to sell, we could sell away from Xponential. So we could sell, for example, the master franchise rights to Australia to someone. Exponential absolutely would have the first right of refusal on that, and that makes complete sense. So no, there's no obligation either way. We'll continue to have, we've got a good working relationship. We'll have open and transparent conversations. But when you look at our journey and you go, okay, in 2018 and COVID hit. 2018 we started franchising. Early 2020 COVID hits. It's not a long time. You take, for us in Melbourne, we had nearly 2 years of COVID. So you take 2 years out of there. We actually haven't been doing this for that long. So we still feel like we've got a lot to achieve. A lot of the plans that we had for that 5-year plan that was drawn up are still in play, and obviously things evolve, but we've still got some work to do. We're not ready. And to be really honest, Joe, we had some bigger offers to hand over the keys, and we said no. That's because the goal was to grow this into something that has a positive impact on a global fitness industry, and giving it away at that point in time wouldn't have been the right thing to do, and certainly would have felt empty on my part. I can't speak for the others, but certainly would have felt empty, and definitely would have walked away not of achieving what I would have achieved. And money's one thing, but it's not everything.
Yeah, then the next question becomes achieving that goal. So continuing to push forward, feeling like you have a lot left to do, wanting to kind of transform the global fitness landscape in some ways. I mentioned this before we jumped on the call. You have the Puma shirt on, so you got the apparel partnerships coming in a lot with fitness racing and Hyrox. So partnerships there. So from a growth perspective, beyond just opening more studios, building this community, shaping kind of this, what is the philosophy of fitness culture broadly, what are the things that are driving that growth? What are you excited about? Maybe even what should we look forward to from BFT?
It's a good question. We're probably in a stage now of consolidation. We've just built out some really interesting technology and software. We launched a world first just over 18 months ago with heart rate technology. We've gamified strength training with heart rate, which again, I just think is a fundamental flaw in our industry, that we're so cardiovascular focused with all of our technology, whether it's, Garmin and Apple watches and things like that, that strength training, which we all know is just such an important part of longevity, to be honest, and health, and has so many benefits to us as individuals, and to be honest, could lighten the strain on the healthcare system in many countries. Yet we're not incentivizing people to do strength training. So, we've just launched that technology, and as a result of it only being 18 months old, we're learning so much, and it's brilliant. Like the insights we're getting, the data we're getting, and what that's helping us to do is to be better at what we're doing. And people talk about innovation and trends, and strength training is a great example. I think it's, number 2 on the global trends this year that have come out from the American College of Sports Medicine. I think if you go back and have a look at all of those reports, it's very rare that strength training's ever dropped off it. It's been a constant. And what we need to do is do it better. What we need to do is make it popular. We need to make it fun. Strength training, it's a skill and it's bloody hard. But hey, you get good results and it can be fun. So they're the opportunities for us. Is now that we have, a growing database, we're getting above 60,000 members, and that's a lot of data and information that we're getting on a daily basis on a system that we own. In terms of that data collection, it's delving into those and getting those great insights, combined with getting the constant member feedback and feedback from our partners about how can we just keep doing things a little bit better without trying to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to go off on tangents and fads. We want to get the basic fundamentals, just keep tightening the screws on those and keep getting them better. Because ultimately we know that that's going to produce better results and produce, I guess, longevity for our business and take our members on a journey. We can't expect 36 members to come into a class and all be awesome deadlifters or, do hang snatches or whatever it is. But that's the expectation, right? You go into a studio and it's a class and it says that that's what's on the program. That's what you're doing today. And it's like, whoa, okay. So that's, for me, that's the path forward. That's the innovation. We're working hard on education and our education platforms. The partnership with Expo, we're really working hard at the moment together and collaboratively on some of our tech stack and our development stuff and our pathway in the future. And I'm sure that will lead to some collaborations with some great brands. We get asked all the time, but I've got an Apple Watch. Why do I need to wear a heart rate monitor? And I'm like, because it's more accurate. It's just as simple as that. And we can see you live. We want to give you feedback. Your heart rate is your heart rate. It's telling us a lot about you. I can't see your heart rate on your Apple Watch. And to be really honest, when you're training, we don't want you looking at it. That's what we're here to do. We're here to coach you. So we look at things a little bit differently, and but that's the path. I think using technology to enhance the member experience and personalize it as best as we possibly can. But the caveat on that is giving them reliable, validated, real-time information, not just numbers. And when we built the system, I went into a lab and we looked at lots of different monitors and sensors against ECG in a lab situation. And so, I had a Garmin watch at the time, and we used Apple watches. We used, optical sensors on your forearm or your wrist, and they could be up to 100% inaccurate against ECG. Yet, you think of how big that industry is, and I read your newsletters, and there's a lot of information around tech, and certainly the space is getting better, and I'm all for it. And I think it needs to get better, and it's getting really close. But that's pretty scary when there's billions of people relying on that information on a daily basis. That's potentially, very, very, very inaccurate. So again, just educating, trying to be better at what we're doing, and using what available science and knowledge is out there to keep us honest and accountable.
Yeah, maybe a couple quick questions before we get you out of here. And I think that point is really well taken. I think we talked about it recently in the context of, even some of the technology players admitting that maybe it's not 100% accurate, but it's directionally correct. And and to your point, it's kind of like, well, directionally and me following it down to every data point are like two different things. So something to keep in mind. And maybe with that, I have a sense of how you might answer this question. But you talk about all the technology, the screens, the wearables, potentially gamifying the workout experience, personalization. Then there becomes this tipping point of well, then is there a time we walk into the gym, studio, what have you, and it's like, there is no trainer. It's all technology led. It is AI coaches. It is this experience where, people have likened it to an arcade and all these different things as technology evolves. How how do you see the role of the human coach? You talked about a lot, right? Making sure they have a trajectory, a livelihood, a career in this industry. So walking that line between technology and human coaching, and then where they fit in, especially like at BFT.
Yes, simple answer is no, I don't think it'll take over. I don't think you'll ever. I think there will be people that go into studios and never interact with humans. That there's just people who love that stuff, right? If you want to really get motivated and stay motivated, humans are humans. We crave human connection. We crave contact. There's very few humans in the world that want to be completely isolated and live on their own and not interact with other human beings. It's just that's who we are. That's how we're built. And coaching is a skill for a lot of people who come into a studio or a gym or a PT session. It's their whether it's a 30-minute session or a 1 hour session or 90 minutes. That's their safe haven. It's their outlet. It's their forget the world. And when you put yourself into a situation where you're relying on technology, all of a sudden you got to start to think again. It becomes partly reliant on you again. So I think it has its place. I don't think it'll take over. I don't think you'll ever remove the human element. We mandate one trainer per 12 people in our business model. So if there's 36 people in the studio, there's got to be 3 trainers. That's because we understand the benefit of that coaching and that human interaction. And sometimes it's not coaching. It's just, hey, Joe, you're looking really good today, man. You got a bit of a pep in your step. For someone to recognize that and to know that, I reckon Joe's feeling pretty good about coming to the gym today, right? And you don't get that with AI or all the technology that is available to us. And what I will say is I think it'll really advance the industry. I think it'll help us to have better tools to personalize, but it's got to be reliable. It's got to be, data that's absolutely meaningful. And until then, I think, it's a little bit fraught with danger. It has its place, but yeah, I can't see. I think COVID showed us, there was this whole, Peloton's taking off and the world's changing and people may never go to brick and mortar. And I actually got interviewed during COVID and said, I completely fundamentally disagree, because we could see our members were screaming out to just get back in the studio and just be a part of a community. And, when you think of all the things that happen in life, if you don't have community, you don't have much. You can't trust politicians and, so when people get together in a community, they're really strong and they feel safe. And that's what I hope gyms provide for people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that probably resonates with a lot of people listening, and it's a good place to wrap up. So the last question, and we get you out of here. Where should people follow along, learn more, website, social, anywhere you want to point them?
Yeah, bodyfittraining.com is the website. BFT_global is the Instagram page, and you'll get all the information and you can go from there, or happy to reach out, Cameron at bodyfittraining.com.
Fantastic. Yeah. We'll have everything kind of linked up in the show notes. Make sure, encourage people to get in touch, check you guys out, and really grateful for the time today. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Really appreciate it, mate. Been looking forward, as I said, to getting on, and absolute pleasure. Cheers.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.